We'll take 2 or 3 minutes extra in setting things in order. And let me see how we do that. I'm sharing the screen. Is that visible to you? Do you see the screen? Aurora ji, do you see the screen? Hello, Aurora ji, do you see the screen? Anybody who is
good school.
Are you able to see this?
We're able to see what makes a good school great.
Oh, that's right.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
Visible.
So that's a great thing. So my daughter Priyanka has also. That's important because I may otherwise keep on going and things are not visible to you. Now that's our presentation. Actually, the topic given is quality dimensions of school and what is a quality school. But I have simplified it. My discussion will be predominantly focused on quality, but then the basic question that I shall be answering is how a good school can be made a great school. And finally, how we can convert that great school into a quality school. Because the focus of our, even the national education policy is on quality. Our national education policy has chosen only 5 pillars: affordability, accessibility, equity, equality, and the last one, quality. And they very boldly say that the previous commissions, like the Kothari Commission and the 1968 national policy, and even the 1986 national policy, had taken some of these into consideration, but had not taken quality into consideration, which they have taken. I have used a quote here: good is the enemy of great. When I read it somewhere in 2015 or 16, I was given to understand that these words were used by Jim Collins. But in 2017, I purchased from Amazon a book by the name Good is the Enemy of Great. And the book was written by one Kurt Reese Paples. The gentleman wants to tell us that if you are doing good work and you have achieved goodness, if you are a good school, if you are a good principal, if you are a good human being, well, then you don't need to work more hard to become excellent. You don't achieve greatness. That's why becoming good becomes an obstacle to your achieving greatness. I mean, I use that quote that we expect that all the schools and their principals and their school leaders to whom we are talking today are all good schools, but we would not be satisfied unless they all become great schools. And not only great schools, but great schools of quality. I would raise a few questions, giving time to my friends to join. What is a school? Let's look up at this question. Now, when you look at a definition of something, my request to you, and this is a hint also, is that when you have to define something, rather than going into lengthy, often definitions, you must look at the class to which this thing belongs and give it a class or a category. A school is an organization. A school is an institution. A school is a building. A school is a place. So give it that class. And then tell us a few attributes of what it does or what it stands for. So I could say a school is a place where students and teachers join together for the act of transmitting knowledge, preserving culture, social progress. Or I could say a school is an institution of engaging the children formally in the process of educating them. Or a school is an organization, an institution which is established by the government or by a philanthropic body or by a non-profit organization to impart education to the general masses. That's how we must define. We must always define by putting that word which you are asked for definition into a class or category. Once you have put it into a class or category, it becomes easy. You look for its attributes, its qualities, its functions. So for me, a school would be either an organization or an institution or a place where teaching, learning goes on, where a formal curriculum approved by the government under certain regulations and statutory conditions is imparted to the children, or where children and teachers interact. Now, what do you understand by quality? A very difficult term, and people find it sometimes very confusing. I don't know why. For the sake of my teachers, I found it very easy. I found that quality would mean meeting the expectations of your customers. Quality would mean coming up to standards. Quality would mean meeting requirements. If you have set up a goal for yourself, you have to meet that goal. Once you meet that goal, your life becomes a quality life. Quality can be service quality, or quality can be manufacturing quality. I mean, we will look at that in detail a little later as we move. For the time being, giving time to my participants to join, we would look at another 3 terms. The first is domains of personality. As human beings, when we look at somebody's persona, rather than looking at the outer physical appearance, the dress, which also matter, we look at predominantly 3 domains of human behavior. These 3 domains of human behavior are the cognitive domain, that's the thinking domain, the knowledge domain. Cognition is knowledge or knowing, thinking. So we look at his intellectual domain. How well does he think? How rational is he? Or how irrational is he? That also is a reflection upon his cognition. Then we look at his second domain. Does he have proper emotions? Does he feel? Does he have sympathy? Does he empathize? Does he experience love and jealousy? Does he experience these emotions? So how matured is he in terms of his affective domain? So the first domain was cognitive domain, that is the intellectual domain. The second is dil ka mamla hai, affective domain, the feeling domain. And the third is his control and coordination of the muscles, especially the larger muscles. How does he walk? How does he move about? How does he hold? How does he control? If a ball is thrown at him, how does he hold it? So we are looking at the psychomotor domain, the movement of the large muscles of the body. And if I have to name these 3 domains now in answer to this question, the 3 domains of personality are the cognitive domain, the thinking or the knowledge, the intellectual domain, the feeling or the emotional domain called the affective domain, and the body, the physical aspects of the body, we call that as the psychomotor domain. I have raised another question here. I mean, I will not need to answer these questions later. All-round development. What does this term mean? We use it very frequently. It's used by most of you in your vision and mission statements of the school. Development is not a process of growth. It is growth accompanied with functionality. A child does not only grow, he develops. You'll say, why, sir? He grows. We see him growing. Well, growth is a physical phenomena. The brain growing in its size but not performing its functions is as good as dead. If the brain starts developing its functions, classifying, ordering, categorizing, serializing, solving problems, taking decisions, well, the brain is developed. It's not only grown in size. The bones may have grown in their length, in their texture, in their weight, but they may be incapable of movement or holding weights or performing exercises like control and muscle coordination. Then the bones have not developed. So when we look at development, we are not looking at the growth in terms of its size. We are also looking at the functions that this particular organ of the body is meant to perform, it should perform. And when we say all-round development, we refer to the all-round development of all the domains of personality. A child can be said to be focused on all-round development when he is trying to improve upon his intellectual development, when he is trying to improve upon his emotional development, upon his social development, upon his physical development, upon his aesthetic development, when all the aspects of his personality which make him a good human being, a complete human being, when we look at all those aspects and we develop him, our process of education is such where we develop him totally. All aspects are attended to. None of them is ignored, as is happening in certain systems of education where there is emphasis on one aspect of personality, while as the other aspects are left to take care of themselves. So that would not be all-round development. And what is then holistic education? You will note here the holistic is spelled differently, although it should have been spelled WHO. I would have loved, because that would have created less confusion. Holistic here is derived from the word whole, W-H-O-L-E, not H-O-L-E. W-H-O-L-E, holistic. Education that caters to all the aspects of human development. Education that incorporates in it all the domains of the personality, and while intellectual education is given through various subjects, emotional development is organized through various co-curricular activities, physical development is catered to through various physical educational programs. When you look to all these developmental programs and your program of education, your process of education is such that caters to all of them, we call this development as holistic education. So now I would go back from the bottom upwards. Education imparted for the complete development and manifestation of the capabilities of an individual will be called holistic, complete education. Education for the head, heart, and the hand. That was Gandhian. 3 H's. Education for the head, education for the heart, and education for hand, dignity of labor. And when the child receives this kind of education, automatically he develops in an all-round manner, and we are catering to all the 3 domains of his personality. And at the same time, such education, if given in an organized manner, such education as is required and stipulated by our vision and mission statement, as is expected by the parents, as is committed by us through our prospects and through our website, if we are able to meet that requirement of education, we will call that education as quality education. And since we are concerned predominantly with schools, we refer to them as organizations that are responsible for imparting this quality education. I move further, the number has increased. We are another short by again more than 20 people still. Let's still then have a look at this video.
Quality. Noun. Level of excellence. This school is well known for having teachers of high quality. Quality of life is usually determined by health, education, and income. Quality. Noun. A property or an attribute that differentiates a thing or person. One of the qualities of pure iron is that it does not rust easily. While being impulsive can be great for artists, it is not a desirable quality for engineers. Security, stability, and efficiency are good qualities of an operating system. Quality. Noun. The degree to which a man-made object or system is free from bugs and flaws, as opposed to scope of functions or quantity of items. Quality. Adjective. Being of good worth, well made, fit for purpose. We only sell quality products. That was a quality game by Jim Smith. A quality system ensures products meet customer requirements. Reference.
You don't need to bother about references now. Let's look at what we mean by quality in education. I have taken these definitions, I learned them in the Quality Council of India, the NABET wing of it. And I must have conducted almost, I would say 17 to 18 workshops for the principals to create a little awareness about what accreditation was. And in the process, while I was helping them to understand it better, I was myself learning. They say that in schools, quality of education means exceptionally high standards. And the high standards do not come to an end. You keep on progressing. By leaps and bounds, you keep on moving forward. It also means being consistent and avoiding any kind of errors. Zero error. That's the concept of quality now. Nowadays, quality is predominantly measured in terms of zero defects. Defects are not tolerated. A system that has defects is not a quality system. meeting the stated purpose. Your school has an objective. It has a mission statement which it has brought forth. And that is the purpose of imparting education in your school. Are you meeting that? If you are meeting that, well then your system is fulfilling the objective of quality in education. Are you giving the children the value for their money? Here I don't mean it should be exactly that money is weighed in terms of the services, but then since they pay for something, do we give them in return? And are they given in return what they have paid for? My tailor had to stitch a suit for me and I had to attend a marriage. He asked for some extra money for tailoring because he had to do it in a hurried manner. I requested him that I should get the suit on Tuesday morning because Tuesday evening I would be attending the marriage. By Tuesday morning, by Tuesday 4 even, he was unable to deliver me the suit. I asked him for the refund of my money. I said, burn the suit somewhere. I don't require it now. We call it in quality terms, PONK, price of not keeping to one's agreements. I told him I can sue you in a consumer court for not having kept to your agreement because you have given on my trial slip the date and time when you will be delivering. Because you were not able to deliver, you are not a quality tailor. So value for money in terms of a commitment. Arora ji is not listening to me. Arora ji?
Not able to hear you because your sound is not.
No, now you can hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Are you able to see the screen? No.
Yes, sir. I am able to see you. Not the screen.
Screen. Everyone. Can you see the screen now, sir?
Yes, sir.
There was a connection, I mean, breakdown in the connection, but it was restored very quickly. I come back to the slide. So I will have to come back to the slide. So when we talk of quality in education, we are talking of exceptionally high standards. We are talking of zero defects in our processes. We are talking of our aims and objects or our purposes that we have stated and meeting them. We are asking for giving the people or the customers value for money and then bringing about a silent revolution and a transformation, and all the participants engaged. All the participants could be the management, the administrative staff, the principals, the teaching staff, the students, the parents, and the community. All the participants, all the owners. I say you must be the best. I've been saying this to my children, to my schools, to my principals. Be the best, but here I use this be the best for life skills. If you want to be the best, if you want your child to be the best, please create in him a desire for lifelong learning. Please teach him how to build up interpersonal relationships. Please teach him how to take care of his health and be physically fit. Please ensure that he understands his emotional development and is able to gather his emotions, bring them under control, channelize them, and use them. He should be able to take decisions and thereby solve his problems, not procrastinate, not let his problems stay over for a period of time. No, solve them. He should know himself, self-awareness. Vandana ji last time explained it very thoroughly, understanding ourselves and knowing ourselves. He should be capable of gathering values, instilling them not only in himself, but in those who come in his company. He should live in harmony with others and with nature. He should live in peace and harmony, live in, where he realizes that there is oneness in the entire environment. He should be capable of intellectually doing logical thinking and even asking questions and doing critical thinking. And he should have the social skills, the three important social skills of effective communication, of empathy, and of interpersonal relationships. These are the three main social skills that he should have. So while you are looking at quality, you are looking at developing your children. Please bear these life skills in mind because the focus will be on them. I remember that somewhere in 1990s, the UNESCO constituted a committee of all the great educationists from almost every country. Every country was represented in this board. We had, I think, I'm not sure about the number, but it was almost 60. We had 60 people in this committee, and the purpose of this committee was that they would plan out as to what kind of education we needed in the 21st century. Even India was represented. And I am privileged to tell you that the gentleman who represented us was Dr. Karan Singh, the great erudite philosopher, thinker, a politician also. He happened to be the Sadr Riyasat and the president, the governor of J&K also. And if you happen to visit the Banaras Hindu University, I would love and request you, please request somebody to take you to the place where the Vice Chancellor's office is. Outside the Vice Chancellor's office, you will see encased PhD thesis on Aurobindo Ghosh. It's a one-page document which awarded him the PhD. And this thesis is by Dr. Karan Singh. So an educationist represented us who understood what education was. And in 1996, Jacques Delors, who was the education minister of the government of France, in Paris, he constituted a meeting and declared this policy, declared the recommendations. The recommendations are now written in a book. The title of the book is Learning, the Treasure Within. You can search for the book on Google, Learning, the Treasure Within. You will be able to read the whole book. The book may take time. I am only telling you what Jacques Delors said on that day and what is written in the preface of the book, the introduction of the book. He said that education in the 21st century will primarily stand on 4 pillars. And the 4 pillars of education has become a very important concept since 1996. It's almost 25 years now. The 4 pillars were learning to know, learning to do, learning to live together and with others, and ultimately learning to be. Now, what do these mean? These are the 4 pillars. You can have your own interpretation of them. Learning to know, thirst for knowledge, lifelong learning. Learning to do, action, not planning only, but action matters. Learning to live together, sinking your own differences, living in harmony with people. And then learning to be, understanding the very purpose of this existence. I am sure Dr. Karan Singh must have contributed to it because he is a man who has read a lot of philosophy and he is supposed to have read the Vedas also. So learning to be must have been a contribution from me and also from certain other philosophers from other countries. I look upon all these 4 very intently. The first one, learning to know. Albert Einstein says that it's a miracle that curiosity survives formal education. To be very honest with you, if I reverse this definition, it means that formal education that we impart to our children in the schools destroys their curiosity. It leaves them with no curiosity left to learn anymore. Therefore, we do not want this kind of formal education. We want education where Alvin Toffler says that the need for the 21st century will be that students learn, unlearn, and relearn. So you have to be constantly learning to know. Keep on learning. Gandhiji said once, live as if you were to die tomorrow. Live as if you were to die tomorrow, but learn as if you were to live forever. So he also talks of lifelong learning. And lifelong learning is a matter of practice, is a matter of your own character. You keep on improving upon your knowledge. And this knowledge that we talk of is predominantly that we receive indirectly through our sensory mechanism in the schools, which we call as apravidya. You will excuse me for my pronunciation because this may be a Sanskrit word which I am not able to pronounce correctly. I read it somewhere and I included it. The knowledge which we impart or which we receive from the outside world can be, number 1, indirect knowledge. How do we gather this knowledge? This knowledge is existing in the environment around us. We gather it through our eyes, through our ears, through our sense of touch, sense of taste, sense of smell. So it comes to us through our sense organs, our sensory mechanism. And this is one type of knowledge. There is another type of knowledge, which is known as knowledge that comes from direct experience. Knowledge that we experience in life, which is extrasensory, which may sometimes come through meditation, through sadhana. We call this self-knowledge also. And this is known as Paravidya. After all knowledge simply means self-knowledge. Knowledge that you have acquired from books may help you, but ultimately that knowledge which you have experienced yourself is far superior to any other form of knowledge. Self-knowledge will always lead to self-improvement. Very difficult for most of the people to experience things and that convert those experiences into abstractions and generalize those abstractions into knowledge. Usually, people need a lot of courage and they have to make a long struggle to gather such knowledge. But one thing is definite, that this commission emphasized on the fact that the future would belong to those who would have a desire to keep on learning. Learning would never end. One lifetime was insufficiently inadequate for learning all the knowledge available in the world. The second is learning to do. Well, learning to do will involve two actions, outward action or outer action and inner action. They say, this is Herbert Spencer, a great philosopher and again an educationist. The great aim of education is not knowledge, but action. Education should not only give us knowledge. That's right, it should impart us knowledge, but that knowledge should lead us to act on that knowledge. The moment we act on that knowledge, our experiences widen, our knowledge further increases. This is outer knowledge. And then education is the movement from darkness to light. This is inner knowledge. Knowledge that comes through meditation, through sadhana. And then when you convert knowledge into a kind of movement, inwardly you grow. You understand life better. You give a meaning to your life, a purpose to your life. And outwardly you act on those values which have been instilled into you. Let me move to the third pillar. Learning to live together with one another and with others. Learning to live together in peace and harmony. Well, this is a dynamic and a holistic and a lifelong process. Throughout one's life, one has to keep on learning. And I'm proud of the fact that in the last 30, 40 years, I have seen our children from India moving out, moving to different universities within India and abroad, and learning to adapt to different cuisines, different styles of life, different ways of living. I mean, a child living with a Vietnamese, a Pakistani, a Bangladeshi, a Chinese, and a Korean. They're all members of the same room, clubbed together in one big dormitory. And they have learned to live, they have learned to adapt, they have learned to adjust. This learning to live together peacefully in harmony is a completely dynamic process. It always keeps on helping you to change. It's a lifelong process, and you keep on sharing some of the values which you internalize first, and then you keep on practicing them. You have to tolerate differences. You have to understand the uniqueness. You have to understand the culture and the characteristics of each individual, and then only you can live at peace. I read a quote somewhere yesterday. I don't know whether it was put in the WhatsApp group by somebody. Yes, perhaps it was in the WhatsApp group. That somebody said that the day I was born or you were born, 5 minutes after that you were given a name, and therefore you had a caste, you had a religion, and you had a faith. And this is the faith and the religion and the caste that you carried for your whole life, and for which you were ready to die at any point of time, and on which you had no control and no choice. Now that really is the thing that we have to internalize. That I was born without a caste, without a religion, without a faith. Now that it has been given to me, let me accept it. That doesn't mean that others who are born a different caste, a different faith, or a different religion, I have any animosity with them. I must learn to live with them and live with them in peace. Now this peace begins with inner peace. You cannot live in peace with others unless you have developed that inner peace, and you have created that place for inner peace in the hearts of individuals. And those of us who are engaged in the search of truth, those of us who are engaged in the search for knowledge and the understanding of that knowledge will always develop that inner peace, because knowledge elevates. It raises you, it lifts you from the abysmal darkness of ignorance. Let's look at the last. To us as Indians, this should come closer. Learning to be, learning to exist, learning to live with a purpose, learning to live and achieve our true potential. We were born with some kind of potential, and God gave that potential to us, and He wanted us to self-actualize. He wanted us to fulfill this potential so that we could go back to Him and tell Him, dear God, whatever qualities you gave me, I have brought them to their highest pitch, and here I present myself for my karma before you. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the pyramid of needs, people first strive for their biological and physiological needs. You need food, you need shelter, you have certain other biological needs. After you have satisfied those, now you want safety and security. Once you are safe and secure, your stomach is full, you have a roof over your head, now you need to own some people or property. You want love from others. And when you get that also, you want esteem, you want respect, appreciation. And then you have certain intellectual needs, your hobbies, your passions. After that, you have certain aesthetic needs. You love to enjoy the sea beaches. You love to visit the best hotels in the world. Or you love to sit in nature and see the vast beauty of nature. And then ultimately, by fulfilling these needs as per their order, you try to reach a stage where you actualize yourself, where the potential that you have, the talents that you have, you bring them forth and you raise them to the highest level. The Maslow's needs hierarchy, you might have seen this pyramid at many places in your books of psychology, does not have this halo kind of a circle that I have given it at the top. I have deliberately chosen this diagram from his B need theory. He gave a theory of needs which is known as the theory of B needs, the spiritual needs, the needs for transcendence. He says that the spiritual needs encompass all the needs. If a man has spiritual needs and he is satisfied, then he doesn't need even to fulfill his biological and physiological needs also. There's no need for them. So being oneself would mean self-actualizing. Being oneself would mean fulfilling our need hierarchy to a level where we realize our true present potential and present ourselves before God as His symbols or as His creations. For achieving all this, you need to hold the values very dearly. Are we holding them dearly? Do we know what values are? These values are basically the guiding principles. They are responsible for our actions and they are responsible for our motives. So if you are clear as to what your motives are, what your actions are, you will find what your values are. They are able to catalyze and help you to achieve your vision. You see, if your values are sound, if they are in consonance with the realities of the world, if your values are not to the detriment of others, then you will be able to achieve your vision easily. People who live by their values, who practice these values, for them, education becomes complete. There's a beautiful quote here: education without values, as useful as it is, seems rather to make man a more clever devil. Or would we like to become angels or devils? If we want to be devils, then without values we can function. But if education is based upon imparting values, instilling those values, and then practicing those values, then we are sure to lead a better life. Let's look at quality in real terms now. What happened? Somebody talked, I tried to mute that person, and in the process, I lost the video. I'll see if I can play it again. I would look at the conceptual framework of quality dimensions. This again I've taken from the Quality Council of India. The input dimension to a quality system in a school is the management quality, the student quality, and the teacher quality. And the output dimension is the student, but a student with holistic development and with a capacity for lifelong learning. Now, to change this management, student, and teacher quality into a holistic development of the students, we need a process dimension. And the process dimension is the quality of the educational process that you provide within the school. How do you provide that? It has a structure. The school structure has a vision. I've not written the word vision here. I've written the word mission because you start with a mission statement. From the mission statement, you draw the objectives. And once you are clear in your objectives, you list down your various processes. Sometimes you write down these processes, the steps that you have to take to achieve a process, the input of that process, the output of that process, the monitoring mechanism of the process. And the moment the process gets documented, it becomes a procedure. So the structure is that you have a mission, you have the objectives which you want to achieve, and from the objectives, you look upon your processes which you have documented, most of them. You have documented them, you have written them down as SOPs, as step-by-step processes. Now, what affects this structure is, number one, for whom is this structure meant? The interested parties. That could mean the students, the parents, the teachers. It could mean even the community at large, the colleges where your children are going to seek admission tomorrow, the employers who are going to look for their services tomorrow. On the other hand, the regulatory requirements, the statutory requirements of the state laws and the regulatory requirements of your affiliating boards, orders that come from the district education officer and the CBSE affiliation bylaws. You will have also to look at the resources that are available because they will have an impact on all this. How well you can achieve your objectives will be impacted by your resources. And when we talk of resources, it's not only men, materials, and machines, it's time also. It is finances also. Money is also a resource. Time also is a resource. And then what is the educational pedagogy that you are following? Is it outdated? Are you going with the traditional methods that were adopted 50 years back in the school and they are continuing till to date? And when we ask you why, you say, sir, because that's what's happening in every other school. So then you are suffering from a malady. We call that the malady of conformity. You are trying to conform with what others are doing. Now, this is the general system. If we have a process and a schematic representation of a particular process, you will firstly understand that a process is some interacting activities and a set of interrelated interacting activities. Remember this, that a process has an input and it has an output. The output of a process can become the input of a process. I have Mr. Kalra here. I'll use his name and he will give me the freedom to use that. I went one day to his office and requested him, Mr. Kalra, have the results of your admission been done? He had a very robust admission system. He would declare his vacancies 2 months in advance. He would finish the registration 1 month in advance. He would conduct the interaction and the interviews, and the list would be ready at least 15 days before the academic session had to start. He said, yes, sir, I have a copy of the list with me. I said, 1 copy? He said, yes, sir, I have only 1 copy. I said, don't you need more copies? He said, no, what for, sir? I don't want to share this information with anybody till I put it on the notice board tomorrow. I said, Mr. Kalra, you have prepared the list of admission. How many students are there? Sir, 120. I said, you need 120 seats in the bus. You need to make transport arrangements. So why don't you give this list to your transport in charge? Oh, I see, sir. He ordered his peon and asked him for 1 more copy. I said, just wait a minute. What about the books and the uniform of the children? So you will have to give a copy of this list to your textbook provider and your uniform provider. What about their timetabling and what about their classroom arrangements? Perhaps you may need a little more teachers. Why don't you pass it on to your recruitment in charge also? Why don't you pass it on to your timetable in charge? So you must have seen the output of the admission process will become the input for the recruitment wala, For the timetable wala, for the examination wala, he needs stationery. For the bookshop wala. So the output of a process can become input to a process. But the input to a process is only the resources and the product is the output. The efficiency of a process is its input and output ratio. If the input is less than the output, the process is an efficient process. Otherwise, if the output is less and the input is more, then the process is an inefficient process. The effectiveness of a process is not measured only in terms of its efficiency, but in terms of its effectiveness. What for was this process meant? This process was meant to select the most desirable candidates available who would fit in our system and the best available from the market. If you have been able to do that, well then your system, your method, your process has been very effective. So effectiveness is a measure of how much of your objective has been achieved. And then every process needs monitoring. This, my dear friends, is the basic defect with schooling. I was able to explain it and repeatedly talk it to my principals in the workshops, both at the NABET and then at the CBSE for the SCA, that whenever you formulate a process, along with the process, please formulate a mechanism of how you are going to monitor this process, how you are going to watch the process that it's going in the right direction, how during the process you can intervene to improve upon it, and how after the process you can measure whether you have really achieved the objective of the process. So this is a schematic representation of what a process is, and you have hundreds of processes: the admissions, the library management system, the recruitment, the examination, the result declaration process, the parent interaction or engagement process. These are all processes related to you. I'll talk about this PDCA, which we call as the Deming cycle in quality: plan, do, check, and act. I'll talk about it a little later after a few slides, because I have provided the slide at two places. I would come to the Quality Council of India, which under one of its organizations known as National Accreditation Board of Education and Training, called in short as NABET. NABET is one of the branches of QCI which deals with education and training. They created, and I think 2007, 2009, they created a standard which was a quality standard for school education. And this standard, if you look at the cover page of the standard, has this diagrammatic representation of three aspects of accreditation, or three aspects of moving towards quality. Number one was school governance, on which a lot of emphasis was laid. This was the largest wheel, and as the school governance wheel would start spinning, it would move the second process, which is known as educational and support process, which in turn would help the third process, that is performance measurement and improvement. I'll take them one by one, not explain them, but give you the broad headings. All the quality concerns of the QCI and the NABET were that in the school governance, we had a general description of what governance was. We had a description of what leadership meant in terms of quality leadership, what was responsibility and authority, what kind of documents had to be prepared by the accreditation coordinator of a school to be presented before the council, what should be the financial resources of a school for applying for quality accreditation of the NABET, and how long and how far should they have been complying with the statutory and the regulatory requirements. I remember in one of the workshops that we kept on conducting till this year, except this year, last time even in December, I had the Secretary of the Quality Council of India, Dr. Girdhar Gyani then, who presided over one of the sessions, the valedictory sessions. And I asked him, sir, can you give me a shortcut and give my principals a shortcut advice to becoming a quality school and to achieve accreditation? He said, Professor Andu, please advise them to comply with all the statutory and regulatory requirements. That's the main step. If they comply with all the statutory and regulatory requirements, affiliation will be a byproduct and accreditation will also follow. So the Quality Council in the first part, in the first few chapters or pages, talks of school governance under these 6 headings. In the second part, which we call as educational and support process, It talks of the human resources, how to utilize them. It talks of curriculum, how to develop it and how to implement it. It talks of the admission policy. It talks of the learning environment, which has to be congenial, which you say now has to be joyful, happy. It talks of the infrastructure required both in terms of its agronomy, both in terms of its requirement and advocacy, and then it talks of health and safety. This was the second important aspect of this document. And the third aspect was how to measure the performance. You see, anything that you do in terms of quality needs some kind of a measurement, and thereby you can keep on improving upon that measurement. You can keep on improving that, improving on that process, or improving on the overall quality standards. A general introduction, then self-assessment. This was very important. You are required to assess your own processes, your own objectives, your own parameters that you had laid down for that process. And then complaint handling, a very important process wherein it was suggested. And I always keep on saying it, do not look upon complaints as complaints. They are opportunities for improvement. They are opportunities to you to get feedback on your various processes and thereby help to improve them. Then how are you going to launch projects of continual improvement, which the Japanese call as Kaizen? Small improvements, small changes for progress, continual. The process of improvement could be continuous, but then continuous things that grow can continuously fall. Continual improvement means improvement, then a gradual consolidation, then again improvement, again consolidation. So improvement has to be on a continual basis, and the management has been given the responsibility of reviewing your performance maybe 3 times as per the affiliation bylaws. 3 times in a year the management meets, reviews the overall performance of the school on the quality parameters and suggests measures that need to be taken. Immediately after this, the Quality Council was already accrediting schools across India, throughout the length and breadth of India. Most of them were Kendriya Vidyalayas, and some private and public schools also joined hands. But the CBSE thought that this experiment needs to be looked into. So the CBSE made a request to the Quality Council that they would like 50 or 25 schools affiliated to CBSE and very prestigious schools which had a brand of their own and a standard quality of their own. They needed those schools to be assessed. And fortunately, I and Dr. Arora were members of that committee which was constituted, about 5 or 6 people who visited those 25 schools and gave a reports. I presented a report on 5 schools, Arora ji presented a report on other 5 schools. And the CBSE, after gathering this report, we thought their intentions were very honest and very good. They wanted to see how we would measure these schools on these parameters, because we shared these reports with the schools also, which would enable them to improve their quality standards. But the CBSE, on the basis of these reports, they developed their own accreditation manual, which they called the CBSE SQA, School Quality Assessment and Accreditation, a huge manual of about 400 pages. It has 7 parts in it, 7 broad themes under which they talked of quality and accreditation of institutions on quality. 1 was scholastic process, 2nd was co-scholastic process, 3rd was infrastructure, 4th was human resource, 5th was management and administration, 6th was leadership, 7th was beneficiary satisfaction. The first page indicates them in this format. SQA, looking at the 7 broad, areas of work or areas of quality development in the school. Number 1, the scholastic process, 2, co-scholastic, 3, infrastructure, 4, human resource, 5, management and administration, 6, leadership, 7, beneficiary satisfaction. If we look individually at these processes, I'll be rushing through them to give you an idea, because now, as per the National Education Policy 2020, it's not the CBSE that will be accrediting schools. It's not the Quality Council of Education, Quality Council of India that will be accrediting schools, but SSSA, SSSA, State School Statutory Authority, will be constituted in every state, and they will be responsible, but I am sure they will look at these very points either from the CBSE or from the Quality Council. That's why I brought them in. I will look at these. In the scholastic processes, we talk of curriculum planning, which the CBSE has brought in terms of pedagogical leadership, academic planner for the whole year. And then they focus on the teaching learning process, where learning must happen. If learning does not happen, teaching has not happened. And then how to assess the performance of the students objectively, and how can this assessment be used to improve the teaching learning process and the schooling system. Then in the co-scholastic process, they look upon the development of life skills, instilling of values, developing proper attitudes, giving them work education, improving upon their visual and performing arts, giving them co-curricular activities, and then activities which are related to health and sports, and as also maintenance of health cards. That in the third infrastructure, do they have adequate classrooms, library, laboratory, computer labs, and ICC facilities? Educate is the word. And are they being put to use? Functionality is important. It's not only that you have them, they are adequate, they are enough for your requirements, but they should be put to use. Does the school have a principal's office, staff room, administrative offices? Does it have support and sports and games facilities? Sorry. Does it have sports and games facilities, hobby rooms, art and music facilities? Does it have a separate girls' restroom, a sick bay? Are there proper adequate water and sanitation arrangements and health management facilities? Do we have furniture, lighting and ventilation? Do we have safety and disaster management provisions and plans in place? Do we have provision for the differently abled children whom you call as the Divyang children now? And do we have inclusive practices for our children with special needs? Are we eco-friendly? Do we have aesthetic lawns and green plants everywhere? As about human resource, do we have adequate school staff, well-trained, qualified? Parents, do we have enough of opportunities for the parents to interact and understand the mission and the objective and the activities that you are doing to achieve that mission? What about your boys who have come out or students who have come out of the school, the alumni, and then the students who are existing in the school? What about management and administration? Do you have a mechanism for institutional planning? Is there a process of accreditation and certification, and are you continuously improving upon your institutional plans? Do you have a policy making body and a goal setting body? Are there effective coordinations with other schools? Are you aware of how to manage your resources? Do you manage your relationships also? Do you manage your activities also? Are you able to maintain data adequately and have a record maintenance system? Is your oral and written communication, bark and calendar we call it in the literal sense in our schools, is it properly maintained? Do you have SOPs, standard operating procedures for the tasks that you undertake? And how about your financial administration? Flawless, lacunaless, honest, corrupt-free practices. In the sixth, leadership, do you have a vision and a mission statement? Do you have strategic plans for your school? Are you ready to make it a quality school? And are you ready to manage change? Because going for change is easy, but managing change is very difficult. What about scholastic leadership, which you call as instructional leadership? What about collaborative leadership? Is it a one-man show or is it a team that is functioning? What are the innovative practices that are being used by your leadership in managing the affairs of the school? And last of all, are the beneficiaries of the school system being involved, and are they satisfied? Because that would mean quality. If they are satisfied and they understand what your promises were, what your commitment was, like, are the students satisfied? Are the teachers satisfied? Is the non-teaching staff satisfied? Is the principal satisfied? Is the management satisfied? Are the parents and the alumni satisfied? And is the community overall satisfied with the functioning of the school, with the systems of the school? The SCOR, that is the school quality assessment, looks at these 7. I would now look at this Deming cycle and request you that if you want to be a quality school, nothing of quality can be achieved unless it is properly planned. You must have a quality plan, a quality policy. And when you have planned, you need to act on that plan. So P changes to D now. You have planned something, you start acting on that. But don't leave things to God. Keep on monitoring the actions as they keep on going. Your plans must have a monitoring mechanism for every step. Keep on checking. Wherever you find a flaw, repair it that very time. Don't wait for the results. Because if you check the system and you find a drawback, you find an error, act on that. So the cycle continues, and you can enter the cycle at any place. It's not necessary you start with planning. For example, if I happen to visit a school, I may start by checking things. I may start by auditing things. And on the basis of my audit, I may say you need these actions to be taken, for which you need to replan yourself, and for which you need certain other actions to be also initiated. I take up this video, and then finally I go to a quality school. This is directly related to sustainable goals of development. We have a mission in front of us, the Sustainable Development Goals. 17 of them have to be achieved by the entire world by 2030. The fourth goal is education, and through education, economic disparities, inequalities, bringing all into the area of education, elevating their life, making it a peaceful society. Through education, other goals can also be achieved. Therefore, it becomes all the more imperative upon us that we provide for our children quality education. Now, I would request your attention because I am changing all this into real sentences and terms now. What we should be really doing. What's a good school or a quality school? A quality school will always be focused on the needs of the interested parties. You will not do what you think is correct. You will look at the needs of the society, the needs of the people who are about to send their children to your school. On the basis of that, you will make a vision, a mission statement, and you will provide that. You will be always preventive in your actions rather than corrective. A preventive action is a way of understanding that a man is a man committed to quality. A corrective action is also good. It's needed, it's required, but then it doesn't indicate quality. For example, the fan that's whirling on top of my head suddenly goes off and there's a kind of a fire erupting. I can use an extinguisher, call the electrician, and he can repair the fan or get me a replacement. This is a correction that I have done. Or a corrective action would be a replacement and check of all the fans. A preventive action would be that the electrician makes a visit to my house every month, once a day, and checks all the fans and all the connections so that such an eventuality does not occur. Preventive action should be, as leaders, our important function. A good school is always systematic in its approach, especially to the professional development of teachers. They do not wait for Mr. X to be free, and because he will be free in October, we will conduct a workshop in October. Or they do not look upon the availability because Mr. Y has come to our state and he is available today, why not request him for a workshop? No. They have a planned program of professional development. They have identified the weaknesses and the gaps of their staff. They know the areas in which professional development has to be done, and the program becomes systematic. They have a strategy for quality. It's important. They have a quality plan. They have a quality mission. They treat complaints as opportunities to learn. They don't show away from them. They don't run away from complaints. They collect. For example, I'll tell you, in a school when we started maintaining a complaint register and everybody was prepared, at least the administrative staff was prepared to smile at these complaints and accept them as realities. And there was a system of dealing with them. I won't deal with that. But at the end of 1 month, when I asked them, how many complaints do you have? They told me over 3,000, which is the largest sector on which you got a complaint. They found out that was the transport, on which we had over 2,100 complaints. So here was an opportunity for us to look at those 2,100 complaints and find out what was common and where were we lacking. By improving upon our transport system, we were able to reduce our 2,000 complaints. Then next month, when we looked at our complaints, we found it had more to do with correction of notebooks. So our improvement was focused now on improving upon the standard of correction. Oh, you can see we looked at all these complaints as opportunities to improve. The quality characteristics of all areas of the organization must be defined. You must have a quality plan and a quality policy. I'll surprise you, a very prestigious organization in India, which has been running for over 50 years now. They asked me to provide them consultancy for a period of 3 years on developing accreditation manuals and accreditation plans and training their entire staff. It was not a school, it was a training organization doing a lot of work in IT. And when I went to them and we started working together, I asked for a quality plan or a quality policy. The organization was 50 years old, but it did not have a quality policy. So my 1 month was wasted in waiting for them. I couldn't write the policy for them. I refused. They said, sir, you write anything now. I said, I won't. I want a quality policy given by you. I can reshape the words. I can change the sentences later on and give it the proper format. But I want you to write the quality policy yourself. You as an institution need to have a quality plan of action and a quality policy. Your senior management, the administration, the principal, the vice principal, the coordinators, they should be involved in leading this quality. Quality is not to be achieved only by the staff, but leading this quality process and exhibiting this quality in their thinking, in their work, will be the responsibility of the senior management. And this improvement process, wherever it is to be done, should involve everybody. Share information with everybody, share knowledge. Knowledge is power. The quality facilitator appointed by you from amongst your staff in your school, he will lead the improvement process. And people should be seen to be improving upon quality. Quality should not be a word which is talked about only, but people should be engaged in improving upon quality in various processes. And please encourage your staff to be creative. They may have their own techniques, their own suggestions, their own methods. The roles and responsibilities of all in the school should be defined. Your assessment and evaluation strategies of a process as also of the teaching learning process should be clear. You should see as a quality as a way of improving upon the customer satisfaction. How can we keep our parents satisfied? How can we fulfill the promises that we have made to our children and to our community? It should be also seen that we have plans for continually improving upon our systems. We should never feel satisfied with what we have. And these plans, they should not be short-term, but long-term plans. Quality should be a part of the culture. You should breathe quality, live quality. I mean, your whole system should speak of quality and the existence of quality. So it should not be a term confined to a file or a paper or a standard. It should not be a process where we say that we have a teaching learning process which is a quality process. No, the entire culture should be speaking of quality. And quality has to be developed not in consonance with the terms that you see outside somewhere, but along your own imperatives. Whatever your strategies are, whatever your availability of resources is, whatever your own mission statements are, build up around them your own quality. You should have a clear, defined, and a distinct mission statement. Your mission statement should not be one borrowed from somebody else. I have seen a majority of schools while writing their diaries or their prospects or developing their websites, they look at the website of another school and borrow their mission statement without realizing that the needs of their parents, the capacities of their staff, the capabilities, the structure, the overall ambience is of a better nature, and they can have a better mission statement. All colleagues also be treated as customers, please. Your performance for efficiency and effectiveness, these are your objective parameters. If you want to measure whether you are moving towards quality, well, then measure the efficiency and the effectiveness of performance of each operative system. I use a quote here. When what we are deeply passionate about, what you can be best in the world at, and what drives your economic engine, when these things come together, not only does your work move towards greatness, but so does your life. For in the end, it is impossible to have a great life unless it is a meaningful life. And it's very difficult to have a meaningful life without meaningful work. Perhaps then you might gain that real tranquility that comes from knowing that you have had a hand in creating something of intrinsic excellence that makes a contribution. Indeed, you might even gain that deepest of all satisfactions, knowing that your short time here on this earth has been well spent and that it mattered. I mean, this is a philosophical interpretation of quality, but I have given you the various parameters and a broad concept of what quality is. Ultimately, each one of you will have to determine your own quality policy, make your own quality plan, look at your own availability of resources, your own vision and mission statement, your own customers, and then devise your procedures. But if you focus on continual improvement, if you focus on reviewing your performance, if you focus on listening to the complaints and speedily improving upon them, you definitely will be heading towards quality. Arora ji, I'm not getting late, but I need 2 minutes more from you if I have the permission. Do you give me 2 minutes more, sir?
But you have enough time for question
All right.
answer.
No, but 2 minutes from you are important. These 2 minutes are number one, I wanted to thank all my friends. I expected around 90 of them, 92 were registered for today's workshop. We have 73 only. But still then, my thanks to all those who are here today and who are not here, who could not attend it because one or the other reason. We have completed today those 6 modules. The 6 modules that we started 6 weeks earlier on every Sunday. We started first with authentic leadership. Our second was a talk by esteemed Balaji. That was a brilliant talk. And the third one was a talk by Mr. Dheer. Major General Dheer is here. Again, a very brilliant and a talk that infused us with a lot of life. Then the fourth one was a talk by Mr. Pandey. Again, wonderful talk. We learned a lot. And the sixth one was Vandana, where she took us inwards into our own self-awareness, self-regulation, self-direction. And the last one where we focused a little on quality. I am so grateful to you for your participation, for the encouragement that you gave to us, and we were able to do this. We may have made some bad decisions, but we did them with good intentions. But bad decisions are still bad decisions. But we did it. Last time, that's about say 10 or 12 days back, requested you to give me your opinion on certain topics that had come as requests to us. Instead of not only giving me your valuable suggestions and feedback and your opinion as to which topics you held very paramount importance, you gave me a long list of almost 47 topics. They are lying with me. We cannot take them up right as of now. We know you've all been pressurized and the screen time is a lot, but we have decided upon your 2 choices that have come uppermost. One is at 75.2 and another is 73.1 or 73.7. I'm not sure. We have not decided upon those dates. The topics are here in front of you. These are our upcoming 2 topics as per the opinion poll conducted by us and your suggestions that have come. I know some of you voted for blended teaching, some of you voted for social emotional learning, but the topics are the national educational policy, some facets of it. You wanted more information on its vision, on its pedagogical structure, that is 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. Some of you wanted to know what are the assessment mechanisms, what is this examination at 3 plus 5 plus 3, class 5 and class 8, and what happens in the board examination. And some of you wanted, this upcoming topics has got repeated here, I'm sorry, on the pedagogy, and some wanted on empowerment of the teachers. The second topic was the challenges that we are going to face when we open the schools, vis-a-vis how to convince the parents, how to realize the fee, how to ensure attendance of students because parents may not be sending them, how to conduct teaching and learning when some students come, some do not come, how to ensure health and safety, how to ensure their emotional well-being, how to cater to their mental health of these students, and how to realize our fees, and how to finally conduct the assessment. The assessment which is day-to-day based assessment, and then even the annual examinations. We have not as yet decided upon the dates, nor have we declared them as yet, but I thought I'll keep you informed. In case you want to add any other aspect to these 2 topics, we can add that up. We will think about it, plan it, maybe by the first week of October or by the second week of October, we tell you what the dates for these 2 topics are. We'll be predominantly and preferably running them on 2 Sundays. Thank you. Any questions we have, I'm ready to share them with you and help them to, oh, Sandeep ji is also here. Your name was not today also in the list, Sandeep ji, I think. Or maybe Arora ji will tell us, but then
I am very much here.
That's lovely.
Welcome,
lovely. I'm pleased. You are always welcome. All of us are welcome, but because see, having you with us is rare because you are spending most of your time outside India now. That's the reason I said this. Any questions anybody has?
No questions, sir.
Sir, because there are no questions, that means 2 things. Now you will have to tell me which one. Number 1, we understood nothing. It was so difficult, so tough. Number 2, sir, we understood everything and we have no doubts. I know that you are deep in thought because moving towards quality is going to be very important. Please don't wait for it. Please don't wait for it. You may be able to do only 2 or 3 things this year. You may add up another 5 things next year. Within a span of 2 to 5 years, by 2025, you should expect the state, school, statutory authority advising you on regulating things. They will be the regulatory authority for schools now. They will be advising you not on affiliation matters, but they will tell you what quality teaching learning is, what quality maintenance of records is, what quality systems are, what quality admission process is, what quality management of labs is. They will be advising you and observing you. So the state will constitute now a kind of an accreditation board or a statutory board which will be going for this. It is important that we start moving in this direction. And any single step taken in consonance with other steps, along with all being involved, will help our schools to grow. Our schools will become better schools. Dr. Saab, anything, Arora ji or Avtar Singh ji? We have Dheer sir here. I would definitely like a few words from him. He is the best exponent we have in quality in our country. I regard him as one of the foremost quality experts. 2 friends whom I have met, blessed to have Mr. Dheer as one of them, and the other is A.S. Chandrasekhar.
Any query from anybody?
Matthew is thinking.
Any query from anybody?
In the chat box, there is no queries.